Hello my dear friends, and welcome back to another Star Wars news update. Today you're in for a really fun show. We're going to be talking about Grand Admiral Thrawn. Star Wars have just unveiled something that fans have wanted to see for years. We're going to be talking about the Acolyte and Rebel Moon. It may not be a Star Wars film, but it's worth talking about considering it was originally pitched as one. Before we dive into today's video though, please be sure to hit that big red subscribe button if you've not done so, and why not also hit the bell to be alerted every time that I post a new video. But without much further ado, and without any more jibber jabber, let's dive straight into this. So we begin with the Acolyte. As invigorating as the prospect of a dark side show is, that simultaneously demonstrates the golden age of the Jedi. A new and exciting report has emerged, which exemplifies the way in which this show is going to be very different to other Disney Plus projects we've seen. Most of what we've gotten for the Jedi is during their low points, during the dark times in Kenobi and Andor, and then decades after the fall of the Order in the New Republic, with Ahsoka, Ezra Bridger, Luke Skywalker's resurging Jedi Temple, which will also fall in a few decades' time. As a result, the Acolyte has a unique opportunity to show us the peak of prowess 100-odd years before the prequel trilogy, and what is a fantastic way they can do this, through the rare, unusual, and downright intimidating lightsabers used by the Order during this period. The trailer at Star Wars Celebration ended with a range of Jedi igniting their lightsabers ready for battle, and if you've read any High Republic then you know just how badass some of these designs were. Their translation on screen is going to be insane. We're talking all kinds of majestic crossguards, dual-bladed whites, purple whip sabers, and the series creator Leslye Headland has noted that the show's combat is inspired by mixed martial arts, so we're gonna get a lot of dynamic physicality in the duels. And staying on the subject of the Acolyte, I'm both pretty pumped, but also kind of apprehensive and nervous about how the show's gonna go about the Jedi, the Sith, and how they navigate established canon and build upon it. But there is one thing I am excited about. The new character guide, Star Wars High Republic Character Encyclopedia, has given me good reason to believe the show might include one of my favourite characters, one I speak about quite often, Master Yaddle. Yesterday, I spoke with my good buddy Star Wars Santa and Jason at Making Star Wars about the show, and we were talking about various possibilities. It's well known Kathleen Kennedy wanted to use this project as an excuse for more Yoda backstory, but now that various High Republic media, including Out of the Shadows, have included Yaddle as part of the story, if they do decide to throw Yoda in there, as well as other prequel Jedi who survive hundreds of years like Master Teresa Nube, they'll probably give us a new version of Puppet Yaddle, just as we saw in episode 1. Leslye Headland is a big fan of the Phantom Menace, and you can't ignore the two Yoda characters from this era, as I'm going to cover in just a moment. The new character guide gives us some juicy details and how she might connect to the Disney Plus show. This series, which takes place in the waning years of this era, has a lot of alien designs, particularly for the Jedi around at this time. Now we know Coruscant is going to feature in the show, so one would be rational to assume we're probably also going to see the Jedi Council. This brings up a lot of possibilities, and we know from a report a few months ago, the Acolyte has more Jedi than any other Star Wars project. And the new reference book Star Wars The High Republic Character Encyclopedia has expanded our understanding of Yaddle as a character. And what's really cool is that they don't overwrite the expanded universe description, but they complement it by pointing out she was known to educate younglings, which is another reason fans have theorized, even by the time of the prequel trilogy, when Grogu was at the temple, even though he may not be her biological son, he would have definitely been trained by her. Ahsoka tells us he was trained by many masters over the years, and Yaddle was renowned for her ability to instill wisdom into younglings. They go on to say this: she doesn't believe in teaching unquestioning optimism. Instead, she encourages them to accept whatever the Force brings. Yaddle offers her advice to new students of the Jedi Temple with patience and compassion. And this line about optimism comes from the fact she was imprisoned on a planet for hundreds of years in the old comics. She doesn't promise fine and dandy, but she teaches young Padawans how to cope with tough situations and is the epitome and embodiment of trust in the Force, finding light in moments of darkness. She is a voice the Council needed, and then they reference her friendship with Venestra Rowe, who we know for a fact at Star Wars Celebration is going to appear in the series. They say when a young Venestra Rowe came to the temple, Yaddle teaches Venestra her first lesson, to trust her instincts. Even though Venestra is a lot older during the Acolyte, both she and Yaddle are still very much around. Yaddle also instilled advice into knights and masters. And so now, my dear friends, courtesy of Marvel Comics, AIPT can exclusively reveal some unlettered preview pages for the upcoming comic adaptation of Thrawn Alliances issue number 1. Now this is really important, not just for this series but potentially the Mandoverse, because we have our first canon visual look at the dangerous Darshi species, also known as the Thin Faces, employed by the Grisk. And later in this issue, as we're going to find out when it drops in January, they're also going to show us for the first time the Grisk, the canon version of the Yuuzhan Vong, a warlike species who are a threat to Thrawn, the Chiss Ascendancy, and the Empire. They're not in this preview though. Some fans mistook the Darshi for the Grisk, but we have yet to see the latter. On the final page of the preview, we see Darth Vader and Grand Admiral Thrawn taking on some Darshi, and considering these were not as violent as the Grisk, I can only imagine how terrifying the Grisk are gonna look in this comic adaptation. This is a massive day for Thrawn fans. They might play into why Thrawn is back in the known galaxy with such a vengeance, why he's allied himself with the Great Mothers, the Night Sisters, Dathomir, and so on. We've had no real idea of what the Grisk look like, we've heard descriptions, we've seen some fan art, and it's mostly based on the Yuuzhan Vong from Star Wars Legends from the expanded universe. Well, we're now only a month away from finding out, and at least we got a look at the Darshi species early. The Grisk were described by Thrawn as the most dangerous species in all of the galaxy, the biggest threat that roams the unknown regions and wild space. And Timothy Zahn did have a creative say in the penciling of this Star Wars comic. I can't wait to see more in January. And so now, my dear friends, an update on Obi-Wan Kenobi's possible second season. Hayden Christensen says he wants to return for as many Star Wars projects as possible. He loves being back in a galaxy far, far away. Both Hayden and Ewan have been yearning for more of this story before A New Hope. But now Joel Edgerton, young Uncle Owen Lars, has expressed doubt on if this is ever going to get made. And let's be real at this point, based on Kathleen Kennedy's words, those of Deborah Chow, it doesn't look as though that's going to happen anytime soon. And now, the Uncle Owen actor says he's not heard a single sausage. Speaking to /film, as expected, he said he has no idea. Shedding further doubt on if it's ever going to get made, he said this: either it's happening and they don't want me. The short answer is no, I haven't. And I'm not even faking that I don't know. If it does happen and I'm in it, I'll be probably wearing brown or some shade of brown, that's all I know. It's not too surprising that Edgerton has no information, and as Lucasfilm prepares for production on the Rey film this coming April, and on the TV front to focus on the Mandalorian story and the Acolyte, I don't think it's on Lucasfilm's radar and list of priorities to do a Kenobi Season 2. Not right now at least. Okay, so now we're going to move on and talk about Rebel Moon. The Zack Snyder Netflix film, which was originally pitched to Lucasfilm as a Star Wars movie, is not doing so well with reviews, and critics are now seeing the reason why Kathleen Kennedy rejected it. As you're gonna see, critics felt as though while the visual effects were spectacular, and while the trailers give you the impression this is a very original piece of sci-fi, the film relies on tired and recycled sci-fi tropes. I'm gonna go through some of these reviews, and these critics do not hold back, and I think a lot of us were surprised. An extraordinarily low Rotten Tomatoes score. So let's see what these reviewers said. We begin with Dexerto, a pale imitator that fails to forge its own space in the legacy of big screen sci-fi. So in other words, doesn't bring much novelty to the table or the genre, and furthermore, does not possess its own original identity as a film. Clarice Luffrey of Independent UK says this: it's a film populated by some of the filmmaker's worst impulses. A mess of imagery, some of it attempting to shock, congregated largely around the idea of what might look good in a trailer, so going for all visuals and no substance. A movie that just gives you the wow big boom explosions in the sky, but a lack of coherence in the narrative to back it up. I think that is what she's getting at. IndieWire says this: a movie that feels like a million isolated storyboards, without a single thing wielding them together. Very similar to the last review. Too messy in its execution. And Variety say, Rebel Moon, while eminently watchable, is a movie built so entirely out of spare parts that it may in the end be for Snyder cultists only. I'm gonna make my own mind up when this comes out, but so far, it looks like it's gonna be a pretty big miss for Netflix. I'm curious to see what fans think.